All right, well, good afternoon. We just made noon. My name is Latasha Deloach, and I will be the host today who will be helping facilitate this discussion. I want to welcome all of you all to the United Way of Johnson and Washington County's Choosing to Challenge 21-Day Equity Challenge panel discussion. We have a wonderful group of folks here today on our panel who will be providing us some insight and taking this challenge to another level. I hope that you all will be able to gain much information from this and the share today. I can do a quick introduction of myself before I get going. My name is, again, Latasha Deloach. I'm the Senior Center Coordinator with the City of Iowa City. Have been in the community for a very, very long time here in Johnson County. And I'm very grateful to be here. Spent an extensive amount of my career working on equity challenges and goals here in the state of Iowa and beyond, and in our community especially. So very excited about this panel. I just want to remind folks that you will not have access to chat, or you will not have access to be able to actually speak on this panel. We only have 1 hour, have less than that, and I'm gonna be quiet real soon so we have a little bit more time. But if you had an opportunity to submit a question, we will try to get to your question. But as you know, there was a lot covered in those 21 days, and so we want to cover as much as we can. We are grateful for you to spend your lunch hour with us. If this is your lunch hour, we do appreciate you. So I'm going to, and I also want to make sure that we thank you all for submitting those questions, because it does really help us shape our conversation today. That's really important. And we've received way more questions than we actually will get to again. So we hopefully at the end, if we have some additional time, we'll try to circle back to some questions, or some of the conversation needs a little bit more depth. We'll try to circle back to that if we have time. Okay, so I would like to make sure that I thank everyone for being here, but I want to introduce them. First up, I want to introduce Simon Andrew. He is the Executive Director of the Housing Fellowship. Simon was appointed Executive Director of the Housing Fellowship in February of 2020, right before the pandemic. Simon serves as the Board of Directors for the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County and the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition. Prior experience includes ADA coordinator for the City of Iowa City. He is a certified economic development professional through the National Development Council and a certified ADA coordinator through the University of Missouri. His volunteer experience includes positions with the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation and building homes with Habitat for Humanity in Uganda. Next up, we have Kenya Cauldron Sarone. She is the VP and Bilingual Business Development Director over at Green State Credit Union. Kenya is the Vice President of Bilingual Business Development at Green State. She is working to expand financial services to Latino and bilingual communities. As a native of El Salvador, she's been a tireless advocate for immigrants. Her advocacy work has garnered substantial local and national media attention. She was named one of the 15 people to watch in 2015 by the Des Moines Register. In 2016, she was named an Iowa International Center Passport to Prosperity. And most recently, she was named 40 under 40 by the Des Moines Business Record. So also welcome to the panel. Next up, we have Keisha Fields, who is the Inclusion and Equity Specialist at Johnson County. She devotes her time to promote inclusion, diversity, and equity at Johnson County and in Johnson County. She partners with departments and offices at Johnson County to encourage a culture where everyone feels like they belong. Prior to her position as an Inclusion and Equity Specialist, she worked for Johnson County Public Health, assisting in efforts to prevent disease and promote health for Johnson County residents. Welcome. Also up, we have Alyssa Voss. She is our Human Resources Director over at the ARC of Southeast Iowa. Alyssa graduated from the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Rapids with a BA in Family Services in 2006. She became a Family Services Coordinator at the ARC of Southeast Iowa in 2007. During her tenure at the ARC, she has transitioned from associate program director to program director to her current role, which is the human services director. She served on the Johnson County American Disability Act Celebration Planning Committee to celebrate the successes that came from the ADA, as well as she has continuing advocacy around those areas. Alyssa shares that it has been a pleasure for her to grow with this agency, its mission and values align with her own. So also welcome to the panel. All right, so for today's panel, if you all wouldn't mind, could you share a little bit about like some of your insights or some of the reflections that you had that were relevant to you with this campaign on the 21-day equity challenge? If you would. Anyone can go.
I guess I can start off. I was especially kind of reflected on the disability and ableism portion. For me personally, having a physical disability and being in a wheelchair, as well as professionally, where we provide services to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I personally related, especially to like the activity, how to talk to a person with disabilities. It's kind of interesting because I can honestly say that I have heard or been asked all of the don'ts on there throughout my life too. You know, people saying, "Hey, you're my hero. You're so brave," or maybe talking to the people that are with me instead of to myself directly. I know when I was younger, I was very shy and didn't really say too much about it or anything. But now, as I got older and everything, really speaking out for myself and pointing out and making people aware. Talk to me, I'll answer instead of having the person I'm with talk for me. Also, kind of reflecting too, being in a wheelchair, it's obvious that I have a disability. However, there's many other individuals, including individuals that we serve, that do not have a visible disability. So it could be quite a challenge when you're out in the community and maybe an individual is not acting or behaving like someone their age is expected to act, and so might get some staring or side comments and stuff too. So really educating people and letting them know it's okay to ask and talk about those situations.
Anyone else want to add some reflections?
I appreciate really the word challenge, because it is a challenge to dedicate in reading every single topic of discussion and taking yourself out of your comfort zone, and realizing that DEI is not just one thing, it's a vast amount of things. And also talking about like current topics of discussion. I love the day 13, history of experimentation, the impact of COVID-19. We're still in a pandemic. So knowing about our past and what is happening now with the pandemic, and actually being open to that conversation and learning more. So it's a challenge to learn something new and go out of your element. So I appreciate this challenge, just opening people's minds to things that they didn't know about.
I echo your sentiment too. I really appreciated the connection between the current pandemic and the mistrust that exists between communities of colors and the healthcare system. I think it's something that we don't hear about, and I think it's really easy for us to make judgment, with the way that people of color care for themselves. And knowing that there's a long history of experiments that have happened within different communities, I think it's just helpful to understand why the pandemic hurt certain communities more than it did others. So I appreciated that, and I'm definitely taking that away as a reminder again of why we're where we're at today.
Certainly with my work in housing, days 14 and 15 really jumped out at me, and those were the discussions of redlining, our national historical codified housing discrimination, and then day 15 with housing discrimination as it exists more today. Maybe not as legally enforced, but certainly still in existence and something we need to work on. I encourage everybody to look at day 15. I grew up in Cedar Rapids and was familiar with some of the younger Harris family children, and their story in Cedar Rapids, unfortunately, is it may not play out as overtly today, but is still present. And the Housing Fellowship, part of our mission is to counteract those forces. So days 14 and 15 really jumped out at me.
Thank you all so much for that. I mean, there's so much to reflect on. There's so many topics, and I think touching back on what Keisha said, it's a challenge. It really is, and thankful for everyone who committed themselves to 21 days. But I tell you, the person who's been working in this area for a long time, it's a lifetime commitment. And so I appreciate the work that you all are doing on a consistent basis, working to continue to have these conversations as well as to enact them in our community in ways that are beneficial for folks who have been negatively impacted by a lack of equality and equity across the board. Speaking of equity, sometimes it's always important to kind of almost define what equity is. And there's like a kind of an adage here that says that diversity is where everyone is invited to the party. Inclusion means that everyone gets to contribute to the playlist, and equity means that everyone has an opportunity to dance. And I always tell people that equity is, if everything was equal, we shouldn't see these different pieces of diversity popping up as a disparity where people are being negatively impacted. If we're going to talk about equity, which is connected to equality, but it is definitely different when we're looking at it in our community and where it shows up and where it does not show up. So one of my questions to you all is, why does diversity, equity, and inclusion matter? I know it's a big question. I know. Take your time. It's something to chew on for sure. Thoughts?
For me, I would say it matters because we coexist as a community. And I think the way that I like to tackle, or the way that I grew up in my household is to think of it as a collective. So don't navigate this world as, yes, you have your own goals, you have your own path that you want to follow, but I think it relates back to, I think, my values and my faith too, to say, if I'm doing well, I want my neighbor to be doing well too. And so I think for a very long time, when DEI wasn't part of the conversation, we were ignoring our neighbors, we were ignoring our peers. And so DEI is important to me because it's an acknowledgement that we're not all at the same, we're not all on the same journey to live a fruitful life in our communities, in our state. And so we need to make DEI as a priority because we want to make sure that every single one of us, by acknowledging their race, acknowledging their disabilities, acknowledging all of these unique identities, that they also have an opportunity to live the life that we're trying to live for our families and for ourselves.
Anyone else?
I always try to put as a business perspective. Times are changing, and our demographics in the state of Iowa alone are changing. We're increasing our number of historically excluded populations. So from a business aspect perspective, what are we doing to keep them here? What are we doing to make them feel welcome here? And also in dollars amount, like we want them to stay here for money purposes, because we want this, Iowa to still be a well-lucrative state, and as an employer, you want your business to still be in business from a business perspective. But I also think about, who is not feeling welcome here? Who doesn't feel like they belong here? I think about those people, everyone, I've been in situations where I didn't feel welcome. So when I don't feel welcome, I leave, and that tends to happen continuously. So retention is, a focus when it comes to DEI stuff. So if you're not, you want people to stay here, but you're not focusing on DEI efforts, then you don't want people to stay here.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point that, so much of the issues that we try and address in terms of public policy, whether it's, the economy, jobs, workforce, unemployment, schools, neighborhood issues, so much of that is tied to inequalities or inequities that exist in, so many realms of our society that a lot of those issues wouldn't necessarily seem as difficult to address if we address the underlying issues of either folks not being feeling welcome in our community or not having a path to the opportunities that they otherwise would have.
You want to add any more to that, Elsa? You don't have to.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with all of as well, and really just it's just important for overall health and mental health as well, individually and as a collective.
Yeah. Just thinking about the welcoming piece. Many times when you don't feel welcome, it feels like you're in a hostile situation. And I've been here like I said, I've been here for a really long time. And I know as Keisha was saying, there's some times when you just like, okay, I don't want to be here. Right. And so I guess my question to you all is how do we champion DEI efforts, in our community to specifically try to challenge that some of these places and some parts of our communities can sometimes feel hostile. It can feel like, indifferent, I guess is a word. So you guys have any suggestions? You all have any suggestions?
I think just really having open and honest conversations about it and just trying to provide a safe place for that. And just creating the awareness and really looking within as well.
I think for me, the very first step in championing DEI, whether it's our place of employment in our community, is to acknowledge how have we contributed to disparities and how has our own organization probably have excluded the communities that we're trying to serve. I think that's the very first step, because if we don't even know our history, how do we know what needs to be addressed? And so the best way to champion is that by one, not taking it personal, right? Not take it personal, but be honest with ourselves. How have we been part of the problem so that we can be part of the solution going forward?
For both of those statements, conversation is very important, but there is a step beyond conversation, and it's action. And if you see that those who say they're going to do stuff, but they're not applying that, then something needs to be done. I'm kind of zero tolerance, but I'm also open to giving people a chance, to change. But if that change is not occurring, then something needs to be done, especially with leadership being examples. Leadership needs to be examples of DEI initiatives. And if they don't fit the cut, then someone new needs to be put in that position who is going to illustrate and showcase what we want in our organization, in our community.
And to Kenya's point, I was really glad that the Equity Challenge started with self-reflection and shared language. That is frequently the sticking point when we try and have difficult conversations, is that we're not necessarily hearing each other as the comments were intended, or we don't realize I don't realize, say, what language I'm using that may be understood in a different way than I intended. So, really encouraging that self-reflection and trying to have some sort of language that is understood the same way on both sides of that conversation. Now, that being said, there are going to be, the question about folks that are maybe indifferent or even hostile to these efforts. That's not going to bring everybody along. I feel like I always need to put in the caveat that, there's not a silver bullet here, obviously, that we're not going to, find the exact right language to say that bring along the most hostile individuals. But for people that would otherwise be sympathetic, but are maybe kind of squeamish about having difficult conversations or don't know how to do it, that is, I think, the best way to start is to look at ourselves and what we can improve in ourselves.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is, like I said, this is really a really deep question to start with. But the reflection piece is huge, but that is the beginning. That is the very beginning of, and it's a consistent thing, right? It's not just the beginning of a challenge, it's a lifelong thing that sometimes you have to wake up in the morning and do some self-reflection. And sometimes you have to backtrack and apologize, et cetera. So I'm thinking about time, but I'm also thinking about so many more of the topics that we need to get into today. Like I said, this is a very, this conversation has so much more depth than we'll ever be able to get into. But I want to touch a little bit on I want to say immigration. So, just a fact for folks that there are probably over 82 million people around the world who have been forcibly displaced, right? And that word is there intentionally, right? I don't know about you, but I'm not always keen on leaving home. And in these COVID streets, I have a tendency to stay home more than go out, right? But just imagine if you had to not only leave your home, but to leave your home country, right? You had to go to a place where you didn't always understand the language, you didn't understand the policy, you didn't understand the subtext of conversations, and how difficult that is. The United Nations Refugee Agency has given us this number of this 82 million. And we're talking about people across all different backgrounds, different religions, different, et cetera, right? That different cultures, ways of how they live their lives. And but many times we have some issues with accepting people from different backgrounds, from different immigrant countries, et cetera. And that's just been in our country for a long time, since the beginning, that we have a tendency to not be very accepting. So I guess one of the questions I have is, why do neighbors feel challenged when we have people who are coming from different backgrounds? Just given the fact that our country was literally created out of immigrants. Like, we literally did not necessarily come here, some by choice and some came by choice, but they were also leaving because of forcible reasons, and we've forgotten this history. So, like, why do we have neighbors who feel challenged by their arrival of people who are new and different?
I appreciate your notes, or just the wording that you used even about the question too, forcibly displaced, right? Because it made me reflect on my own immigration journey. So I was born and raised in El Salvador. My family and I migrated to the United States when I was 11, and it was never in our plans to leave El Salvador. I grew up even having an idea of what university I was going to go to when I grew up. I knew that I wanted to buy a house right next to my parents in our neighborhood. And so it was a decision that we could no longer ignore. It was a decision that was almost, we had to, right? And so just, thinking about the choice that my parents made of migrating with their children. I was 11, my brother was 9, and my little sister was 6. No parent would make that decision if they weren't forced to make that decision, right? So I think the question was posed excellent. And I think the reason why people have such a hard time accepting individuals that are being displaced is, again, it goes back to the nature of this country. Unfortunately, the United States runs in a very individualistic way. So I feel like when immigrants come they are at top of discussion, we automatically think that they're going to take something away from us, that our way of life is going to change because we have new individuals coming. But study after study shows us that our lives are changing for the better. just think very basic. Think of the food we can enjoy. Of all the different food choices we have available because of immigrants. Like, that's bottom line, right? But think about just all of the different contributions that immigrants make to the United States too. And so I think challenging ourselves to start to think of as a collective, as a community, and even welcome other folks that are not there yet with facts, and maybe not so much opinions, but literal facts about why immigration is even a thing in the first place and how that's actually changing our country for the better.
Thank you for that. Anyone want to add more to that? She wrapped it up really well.
She did, and I also don't want to dominate the conversation. But Kenya, thank you for sharing your story. And one of the things I think to debunk myths is hearing stories, and being open to hearing those stories and developing deeper relationships with people that are outside your comfort zone, outside of your bubble, and understanding their process. So I did volunteer with the Catherine McCauley Center in Cedar Rapids, and I was working with individuals who were learning English as a second language or navigating just basic living, and getting a glimpse of their life, completely just transformed me as a person and my viewpoints on people coming into this country. And just like the struggles of even knowing the bus system of how to go to the grocery store or pay my bills, it's so overwhelming. It's also, but these are things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And to offer the littlest thing of a hi, hello, how you doing, completely change their perspective of how we are here in America, because they see it as everyone's for themselves. And coming from their countries, there's we're all based on community and helping one another, but here I feel absolutely alone. And I know that we've all been in a place where we felt alone, but think about it from their perspective. We're just I am in a new country and I am really completely by myself and I'm just trying to survive. That's how I say, you're just taking the time to speak with them and to help in the littlest way possible, just by saying, hey, there's a grocery store down the street from you. Oh, I didn't know that. It's something so simple that we can do just by having a conversation with someone.
Can I, one thing I wanted to add to that was, so how do we dispel some of the myths, right? So we've done this reading, we've learned a little bit, we hear the stories, right? So stories is one way that we can kind of dispel myths. Do you all have other suggestions on how we do that?
Volunteer, and you don't have to dedicate a lot of your time to volunteer to help someone learn English or navigate just basic needs in the community.
I would say stories are a great way too. Facts, for example, one misconception that people have about immigrants is that they commit a lot of crimes. Crimes are going to go up. I've heard that for almost 2 decades. But when you look at the studies and the actual truth is that immigrants, specifically undocumented immigrants, are less likely to commit crimes compared to U.S. citizens. And so just by sticking to the facts too, it's also important. I would caution us when we use stories to try to challenge stereotypes or the misinformation out there about immigrants, to make sure that you're not tokenizing certain immigrants to drive your point across. I've definitely been tokenized when I was younger, and it does hurt other immigrants that don't fit that description at the end of the day. So just being mindful of the stories that you're using, that you're usually telling a wide range of stories. So for example, with DACA recipients, we usually hear about DACA recipients as college graduates and trying to obtain a college degree. But in reality, if you look at the demographic of DACA recipients, most DACA recipients are parents and they're head of households, and their stories aren't being told. And we don't tell the story that they have children that are U.S. citizens, so that if they were to ever get deported, that it would actually hurt U.S. citizens in the long run. So stories are powerful, but just diversifying and making sure you're telling a wide range of stories of immigrants in the United States.
There's also an initiative each year. It's called Welcoming America, and it's actually going out and getting to know your neighbors. It is focused on immigrants, but it's focused on just in general getting to know your neighbors and helping them to feel welcome. So something like that is done on a yearly, annual basis is to debunk some of those myths.
Yes, thank you all so much. I don't know if Simon or Alyssa wanted to chime in. But thank you so much, because it's really important, especially what Kenya was saying about knowing that even within different immigrant communities, there's diversity within there, right? So just because you met one person from one country does not mean that they're going to be exactly like someone else from that same country. They may have similar values, but that does not mean that they also are played out in the same way. We both can value work. But for me, that means I worked as hard as I could. I'm leaving at 5, and for somebody else, they're staying and they're working overtime to make sure that their work is a certain way. But we both value work, so it can look differently. And thinking about folks who are coming into our country, we also are seeing people leave, right? We're also seeing people leave our country for not always feeling welcome. Even as U.S. citizens, but and some of that has been based off of their feeling physically safe or their mental health, etc. And so, we know that health is not simply just that you're well, right? But what is wellness, right? What does that mean physically, psychologically, mentally, socially? Are you able to be socially connected to other people? Those things are really important. And so, but there are barriers for our undocumented immigrants to have access to healthcare, to have access to mental health care, to have access to someone who speaks a similar language, that understands the cultural background that they're coming from. And so, and it goes beyond just having different policies and the financial pieces of healthcare and health insurance, but discrimination is there, right? The fear of deportation if you're an undocumented person. So how do we provide safe opportunities for all to increase the use of the healthcare system? I mean, because we all, especially right now, we're in a global pandemic. People need to be able to know that they can have access to healthcare, and so I'm really interested in ideas on how do we provide safe opportunities for. Can you hear me?
I'll take this.
You gotta go.
No, I'll step back after this one, I promise. I think the answer can actually be taken and implemented in any industry, whether it's healthcare, financial services, different nonprofits. You have to go where the community is. You have to go and earn the trust of the community. And that could look like hiring individuals from that same community that can help you build that trust. But I think just not expecting them to come to you, because they're not going to come to you, especially with healthcare. Undocumented immigrants, maybe the first time that they see a doctor is when they end up in the ER because they haven't gotten ongoing care. And I've seen that with my own family members as well. So being part of the community means looking like the community and going the extra mile to make sure that you're earning the trust of those folks.
Can you be tag team?
Yeah, feel free.
I agree with her 100%. And I also think that a continuous relationship, this is not a one and done, I'll go in the community, we did this. That continuous relationship, building that relationship is key. But I also think that you should address your practices, making sure that they are inclusive and address them on a continuous basis. Things change, climates change, so you need to continue to do that on a continuous basis. Are we making sure that everyone feels included in our practices and what we do medically, and then also going to the core of education. So making sure that our future doctors, nurses are also in tune to the biases that they have and removing those biases whenever they're interacting with someone that is different than them.
Yes, all of that. Thank you so much. So because I am huge on Black maternal health, I have to throw this question in here. So we know even in the state of Iowa, Black women's outcomes when it comes to pregnancy as well as their infants are dire. It's devastating what's happening nationally. And it's unacceptable, honestly. I think right now the rate of Black women dying here in the state of Iowa for birth-related or pregnancy-related deaths is probably about 6 to 1 for Black women to white women. And that's just devastating. As a mother, that's just devastating to know that here and in other parts of the country, those numbers are even higher. And believe it or not, it's affecting more college educated Black women. And so there's issues there about their voices not being heard and them not being, their complaints not being listened to and kind of brushed off, which causes other complications. Or sometimes even in the hospital, they're complaining about something that's wrong and they're being ignored, and it ends up causing issues later. So what are some of health services barriers that are faced by Black women in the community? I know this is something Keisha and I have worked on some of this outside in the community across the state for a while, but if others have seen things with the communities they're working in, please share. What are some of those barriers that are being faced by women in general too as well?
You said it, the biggest one, being heard and being ignored. We always have that feeling, it's like somebody, right, and for it to be told like, no, that's all in your head, or just for it to be completely dismissed. So in the medical field, for your doctor to tell you like, oh, that's all in your head, it was like, I got a history, of this occurring, but yet you choose to ignore it, when all I want you is to care about me, to see me as, a patient, and that is a patient that you care about. And it's like, I want to see you, deliver your baby, healthy baby, and you be healthy as well. I want you to see me as an individual and that you care about my life and that you care about my child's life. I am, eventually going to become a mother. So I think about like, who do I go to make sure that I'm heard, and the lack of doctors who look like me, is a barrier, to know that I feel more comfortable with someone that looks like me because I feel like, okay, we can relate, you see me and you versus vice versa. So I think that's a huge barrier, but then also the education portion of, the medical professionals, you have biases, we all have biases. How are you addressing those and making sure that they're not coming into the room when we talk?
Kenya, Alyssa, Simon, anyone want to chime in? Okay. Very important topic. We can definitely put some information in the chat about the Black Maternal Health Collective here in Johnson County that is working to try to address this issue locally and connect it statewide, so that you all can get connected more about that. But just touching on the invisibility piece that you mentioned, it reminds me of, and Simon, I'm coming into your world a little bit here, but a lot of times when it comes to people who have disabilities, not all of them are visible. Some of them are invisible, and those folks go unheard as well. And sometimes those with physical disabilities, that can go unheard because then they're looked at as not being normal or whatever that's supposed to mean. But we have the ADA, and it is there to make sure that folks have access and have equality. And so it's designed to protect people against discrimination, ensure that they have the opportunity to fully participate. And so when it comes to access to employment, The ADA, that's one of their main promises is that people with disabilities will have opportunity to have gainful employment. And so what are some steps that you all are seeing or some of the work you've done, Simon or Alyssa, specifically, that will allow equitable access for people with disabilities to job openings? I was a job coach, so like I've done a lot of work when I worked with Goodwill, and I know how difficult that can be, but just me being there many times and being able to redirect and be able to give instruction differently made the difference between someone keeping that job and not keeping that job. So, I know that there are some employers who are open that if there's an additional person there to support, they're more open to that. But what are some other things that employers can do to allow this access to continue and to maintain?
Yeah, just like with that too, offering a variety of ways to apply and making job posting and things too accessible for all. As you mentioned, we do a lot of job coaching as well, and trying to out and connecting with different employers and providing assessments with the individuals we serve too, just to see if that's going to be a good fit for them or not, and then finding that good fit with them, and as well as providing those ongoing supports of job coaching as well. I know one thing personally for me, when I started working my job, my boss at that time had me come in and basically kind of look over everything and just let me make some suggestions of, it wasn't anything like revolutionary of changing, big things, but just being able to point out okay, that shelf is too high, or bringing these things down, or let's rearrange this area over here so the aisles are a little bit wider. So it's just nice to be, heard and appreciated too, of like, okay, you're the best person that's going to be able to know how to navigate this. So how can we help do that? So just having that openness for that to help.
Yeah, my wheelhouse is more public facilities and public services, but to Alyssa's point, we saw the most success in the city when we engaged, the widest array of folks that we could. And, how does this work for you? And that's not just applicable to persons with visible or invisible disabilities, but, with, say, sidewalks and curb ramps, I would always point out that if you're, pushing a baby stroller, or if you're pushing a grocery cart or whatever, riding a bike, those accessibility impacts everybody. And, whether or not you're, seeking to, let's say, provide accommodations to an employee, just, figuring out how the workplace can be structured to work best for them. I think too often employers, probably including myself, get kind of myopic, and this is how things have always been done, or this is how our the workplace is structured, and we need to find somebody who fits into that, rather than finding the best person for the role and then structuring everything else around that, which isn't as complicated or difficult as people might assume if they hadn't done that in the past. But yeah, that was always the key, was just engaging with most folks as possible, because I'm not going to see everything, from the same way as everybody else when we're designing this. Let's say you're designing a new rec center or something. You do that with users, what they want to use it as, but also making sure that everybody's able to come in, not just your historical users, but who has felt excluded in the past that might come in to apply for a job in your business, or come use your facility in any capacity.
Yeah, yes, we definitely see, like you're saying, it impacts all of us. Accessibility impacts all of us. I think one of the curb access is one thing, but as a previous school board member, just even thinking about our playgrounds, right? And the work that we've had to do specifically in our community to think about who all, when we say play, that should be open to all of us. and the work that we've had to do and the restructuring and the master plans and different things we've had to do just for play access and trying to make sure that we're being more accessible to all people to be able to participate with their friends, and to have that as a part of their life of enjoyment. I'm looking at my time and I got a couple of questions I'm have to skip over, but I wanted to specifically, this is a question that someone sent in and I wanted to make sure that we address this or at least touched on it the best we could with the time we have. But the question is, it's kind of a statement with a question that says, we know we are better when we work as a team to dismantle and reimagine systems that will work for all, right? It's really kind of going back to our ADA question. With school district elections coming up, views which flat out reject and abhor anti-racism work, right? We know that there are actual laws enacted, have the potential to impact the inroads that have been recently established in our schools, right? We've worked really hard. I know I also worked really hard on equity issues personally. When we look at our youth for change, as they have tools, mindset, skills, vision to enter society and continue this work, how do we not lose our glimmer of hope in those influential circles, in those elected folks, in those folks in our community that are having conversation? How do we not lose that glimmer of hope that our children are the future about how anti-racism can be in our country, right? Where it's like the next generation is gonna get it together. Well, I've been here for a couple of generations. Y'all, we still on the struggle bus. So how do we stay hopeful? Because I know I have days when I'm like, forget it. So what strategies, what ideas, what thoughts do you have about that?
Small wins matter.
Can you say that again?
Small wins matter. Small wins matter. You may not be able to do something big, but if you have accumulation of those small wins, put them all together, big, and a sustainable wins. So really focusing on having those sustainable wins that are going to impact in the longevity instead of thinking, what do we do right now? It's like, right now we can put a Band-Aid on it, but I really want this to heal and really be something bigger, so really focusing on those small wins, whether it's a community event, that's a small win, because you're engaging the community, you're offering options, for DEI efforts to grow. So I say to myself all the time, small wins matter, because they can influence change.
Beautiful. Others?
Yeah, it's always difficult to, balance celebrating, progress that has been made or, how far we've come and still maintain the urgency and the focus on how far we have yet to go. And I guess that's a long way to say I don't have a good answer to this question, but it is a tough balance to strike to point out how much things are better in some areas than they were even, since I was a kid. But we obviously have so much more work to do. And again, as Keisha said, not putting a Band-Aid on things, that's probably a lot of the progress that's been made, at least in my lifetime, than not really addressing the systemic underlying issues. But, I think we can maintain hope by like Keisha said, celebrating some of the wins we've had, but, always with the caveat that that's day one, that's the start. But yeah, it's a balance that I've never found easy to strike, at least in my work with housing. We've obviously made a lot of progress in our organization, but where it's scratching the surface of all the work that needs to be done.
Okay. Let me see. How do we not lose So this is actually almost a little personal, even in my own life, but we have seen this happen a lot, and we probably will continue to see this. This happens a lot in Iowa, but we keep losing equity coordinators. I mean, honestly, we keep losing equity coordinators. I mean, it's hard work. It really is really difficult, hard work, especially as a person of color. So I'm kind of asking some people who might do some of this work, but like, how do we not lose these people when we have newly elected folks or folks who are coming in and they start cutting budgets, and the place that they're cutting is the DEI program. So suggestions on, for our area and surrounding, because these folks are undercompensated in my eyes, because you have to take that work home with you, especially if you're a person of color, which we have a tendency here in Iowa. There's like, the browner you are, the more likely we're going to hire you for that position. I'm just going to be honest. And not realizing the additional stressors that come with, I'm not only advocating just for, but this also impacts my life directly all the time. So suggestions. There's a whole bunch of organizations on here waiting for this answer.
I would say I don't have the answer for budgeting, of course. I don't have that. But I do think, and something that I was thinking about is, when you're doing anti-racism work every single day, it's really hard to turn it off, especially if you're part of the community that is directly impacted by all of the policies that you're trying to change, right? So if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people, right? And so that needs to be reminded, even from the leadership of these organizations. You have to, even at times, force those individuals to take care of themselves in whatever fashion that looks like. And also making that available for them to take care of themselves. I've done DEI work since I was probably 19 or so, or just a lot of immigration advocacy. And when you don't see the needle move, I mean, we still don't have comprehensive immigration reform, right? And that's something that I've been talking about for a very long time. It's really hard not to become bitter. And so I've had to take a step back and take a deep breath, right? And take care of my mental health, so I can come back even stronger, and even hungrier for justice. But that happens when you take care of yourself first. So the budget issue, don't have an answer for that, but I do think that folks that are doing equity work need to take care of themselves first before you can actually accomplish everything that you're set out to do.
I'll speak on the budget issues. I'm always used to working with small budgets. So champions, utilizing and highlighting champions in your area. For us, we have D&I ambassadors, we have D&I committee members, and just having them just be illustrating what DEI should look like. That's on the budget. If you got a small budget, really highlighting those champions and really encouraging them to encourage their peers, their coworkers, to like, let's challenge ourselves to do better. But I also challenge leadership. Leadership should definitely reflect what is the initiative of your organization. And when leadership is strong on DEI stuff, coordinators will stay because they have that support. So the systems, I'll be punching out systems, like changing them, like that needs to change. Leadership needs to be reflective of DEI initiatives, and that will help in retention wise, because you have that leadership support.
I will say, as a consultant, also put your money where your mouth is, right? Yes. It should not be that the equity department has the smallest budget. I'm saying this, my boss ain't on the call, but look, seriously, why is it that is the smallest budget? Because my thing is, these are your welcome people. These are your people who are welcoming people into your space that want to stay. These are the people who are helping maintain and retain the welcoming nature of your organization. And if you are giving the least amount of money to that effort, you don't want people to stay. And, you know, I've been in Iowa a long time and I've seen a lot of people of color come and go because they don't feel welcome. If anything, before we leave this call, the things that keep popping up is that people want to be heard and seen and they want to feel welcome. So I hope out of the 21 days, I hope that resonated for all of us, that is a main thing, that people do not feel heard, they do not feel seen, and they do not feel welcome. All right, let me move on. Look, I didn't run out of time, basically. Sorry. Well, there were other questions I really wanted to get to. I think we touched on a lot of them, definitely looking at rights for LGBT folks and other discriminatory policies that are happening, and how equity seems like a concept sometimes and people are looking for more concrete ideas. I really encourage all of you all to please continue this conversation in your organizations. Seek consultants. Some of y'all feel like if you done took the 21-day challenge and you done read a couple of books and now you can be the DEI person for your organization, it is much deeper than that, respectfully. We are unfortunately out of time. I was gonna give everybody an opportunity to wrap up, but we have to stay true to our 1 p.m. end time. Please reach out to some of these folks. If you want them to consult for you, please pay them. That's just my personal opinion. But it's important, because if it's important to you, then you should have the financial support to also do that thing that you want to do and change in your organization and in your life. You can seek out personal coaches for these things too. So we bid you adieu, and thank you for joining us on this 21-day Equity Challenge panel today. Thanks.